Hey everybody, um, I'm Romi Hill, and this is the second of my 5 installments for the Autumn Shawl-Along in 2021. So just let me see if all of my settings are looking right. Time I do one of these, something goes weird. Yeah, so I just am going to be checking things all the way through. And I noticed that, for instance, um, my the closed captioning, or actually not closed captioning, it's just captioning, is lagging a little bit, but hopefully it will catch up. Anyway, today we're going to do the second section of Bright October, and you can see it over here behind me. So it's this section here, the mosaic. So what we're going to do right now, we're right up at this little tip here at the end of chart B. And then we're going to transition all the way around and start in with the mosaic knitting. And thank you so much for joining me. Anybody who was able to make it today, if you have questions or anything like that, go ahead and ask me in the chat. So there's a little bit of a delay, but I will be watching to make sure that I get your question answered. So let me start with this. Okay, I'm just going to share my hands with you. Alrighty, so here we are. We're at number 2 right here, and we are about to transition from that top part of the triangle into the mosaic. So we're going to be starting to knit down. So there's a little triangle up at the top, and then we're going to be knitting down on the mosaic. So I did actually just cast on a very few stitches here so I can show you on the camera here what it looks like to transition. So this is just chart B. This little part right here is just chart B. So this is what you're going to be looking at right up at the top of your work. So what we're going to do is after chart B, you can see right at this area here. So after chart B, you do not want to turn your work. So here it is in the middle. You can see here's the double stitch here from the German short row. And then over on this other side, there's also a double stitch here from the other German short row. And right in the middle here, there are 6 stitches. So those 6 stitches in the middle there is what I was referring to up here at the end of chart B. And as we're about to go into the transition, this little part right here is what's going to set us up to be able to transition all the way around and work all of those German short row kind of double stitches. They're not real double stitches, but they do look like it's a double stitch. So what I did here, I did actually cast on and do a few rows here so I can show you how to pick up stitches in the side. So we're after chart B, so I'm not going to be turning my work, which means I am facing the wrong side of my work. I'm going to place a marker here just to mark where I am. This is only to kind of show me, like kind of jog my memory when I get here. And I remember, oh yeah, I have more double stitches to work over on this side. So I just want to make sure that I'm kind of looking out for them. So on yours, you'll have 63 stitches to purl. I only have, I think, like 9 stitches. So here we go. So I'm just going to continue. And the first stitch I come to here is a German short row stitch, it looks like a double stitch, but it is actually only 1 stitch. So I'm just going to work that as a purl. So that's just 1 purl in that double stitch. And then I'm going to go on here. So here is my next double stitch here. And I'm just going to insert my needle right through the middle here so you can see it looks like 2 stitches, but it's not. You can see up at the top here that there's like a little join. So that is actually 1 stitch. And I am going to insert my needle through both of those and do my purl. So there's another German short row stitch worked. You can see on this side, it's not very obvious where the short rows were. So let's just keep going here. And then I have another one here. Again, you can see it has that little join up at the top. And I'm just going to purl that as usual. And I'm going to pretend I did 63 stitches, but obviously I didn't. Okay, so here I'm at the end here, and you can see it asks you to pick up and knit 3 stitches through the back loop from the edge of the setup rows. So here we have the setup rows here. So I'm going to use my needle to kind of help me pull this up so I can work that through the back loop. So there's 1 stitch. So you can see here it would be really loose if I didn't work that through the back loop. So that is why I'm doing that. So there's my 2nd stitch that I worked. And then I'm just going to do one right in the edge here. And that's going to be my 3rd stitch that I picked up just from the edge of my my cast on row, and then those other rows that I worked right at the beginning of the shawl. Okay. So after you've done that, the stitch count will be 135 stitches all the way across in your whole piece. Up to now, I've just been talking about how many working stitches there were in the middle, but on this, this is the full count. So each of the stitches, each of the German short row stitches where it says a double stitch, each one of those is counted as 1 single stitch. So it's 135 stitches, and it is not counting the German short row stitches as 2 stitches. It is counting them as 1 stitch apiece. Okay, so here we are at the transition. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to knit front and back. So that's an increase of 1 stitch. And then I'm going to knit 1 through the back loop. And then I'm going to purl 1. Okay. So that is my first part of that row. And from here, I'm going to do a purl 2 and then purl front and back 21 times. Because I have so few stitches on here, obviously it's not going to be 21 times before I get to the center. So I'm going to purl 2 stitches. Okay, so now I'm going to purl front and back. So I'm going to purl in the front and then come around in the back here. So that's twisted. And I'm going to purl another stitch. So that one is an increase of 1 stitch. So I'm going to purl 2 stitches and then purl front. And without taking that stitch off of my needle, I'm going to go in through the back of that purl and then purl another stitch. And that's going to increase by 1 stitch again, then another purl 2, and then purl front. I'm not taking it off the needle, and then it's going to go right into the back. Okay. So now I'm at my stitch marker, and that's just sort of like a heads up that from now on I'm going to be actually dealing with those double stitches from my German short rows. So I'm just going to kind of keep a good eye on them. So I am, let's see, I am right here. So I'm going to remove my marker. I removed my marker, and now I'm going to continue. Each double stitch is going to be 1 stitch, and I'm going to purl 2 and then purl front and back 23 times. The purl front and back will never fall on a double stitch. So just remember that. So I'm going to purl 1, 2, and then purl front and back. Okay, so purl 2, and I'm going to purl front and back. And you can see here is one of my double stitches. So I'm just going to purl that and purl the next one, and then purl front and back. And you can see that those, none of the purl front and backs will hit the double stitches. So if you're off on the there, if one of them ends up on a double stitch, then you know that you're doing something wrong. You're a little bit lost, and you want to go back and kind of count, make sure where you are. Okay, and then another 2 stitches and purl front and back. Okay, so at this point, we are right at the end. So I'm going to pick up and knit 3 stitches through the back loop from the edge again. And just like we did on the other side. So just going to take a look here. It looks a little bit different from the front side than how it looked on the back side. The first one I'm going to pick up does not have a garter ridge here, so I'm just going to stick my needle through, and I want to make sure that I am working that through the back loop so that it's not all open and messy. So, and then I always like to pick one up right in that cast on row just to make sure that the top part goes straight across. So let's grab that. I'm having just a little bit of a problem grabbing it, but I got that loop, and I'm going to work that through the back loop. Okay, so now I'm right on row 2. So I'm just going to kind of power through that really quick. So I'm knit front and back, and then I'm going to knit one through the back loop and knit to 2 stitches before the end. And just going to kind of cruise along here. Everybody knows how to knit, so let's just get to the end, and we will talk about make one left and make one right. And while I'm doing this, if you have any questions or anything, please go ahead and ask me in the comments. Just making sure that I actually have my audio on, because there was an article a while back about a professor that gave an entire class on Zoom with the microphone off, and he wouldn't let anybody talk to him. So he had no idea that he was muted through the entire class. And then he found out at the very end that he was muted the whole time. So I don't want to be that professor. Okay, so I'm at the end here. Obviously, I don't have 185 stitches, but you will. So here I am. I'm just going to count here 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. Okay, so I have 41 stitches. So I'm going to knit 20 stitches here, and that will put me in the center. And I'm just going to show you the make one left and the make one right. And then we'll go on to the mosaic, my favorite part. Okay, so I'm going to knit front and back. And then I have a knit one through the back loop. And I have 18 more stitches to go till I get to the center. Okay, so that I believe is my 20 stitches. Let's see. It should be 21 actually. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 21. Okay, so here we are at the center. So I'm going to make one left. So here's a great way to remember make one right versus make one left. So on a make one left, and you have no idea how long this took me to remember this, but on a make one left, when you look at the stitch afterwards, it's going to curve around to the left. So in other words, like when you pick up that, like you pick up the bar and you twist it and you knit into it, or you can purl into it, but in this case, we're going to knit into it. This is a make one left. So a make one right goes the opposite way. Make one right, this top part here twists to the right. So I find this much easier to remember than the actual instructions on how to make them first, because everybody knits a little bit of a different way. So I like to be able to read my knitting. So I'm going to do a make one left, and I'm going to make sure that when I pick this bar up and I work into it, that the bar looks like it's twisting to the left. So I'm just going to pick that up and put it up here on my needle. So this has the right leg of the bar in front and the left leg in back. So I want it to twist around to the left. So I'm going to work this through the back loop. And so you can see here that that little twist here, it goes to the left. So that's how I can check myself and know that I did that right. I'm just going to put a marker here. And then here is the center stitch. I'm going to put in another marker. And now I'm going to do a make one right. So I've actually reversed this one so that the right leg is in back here and the left leg is in front. And now I'm going to knit this. So I want this to twist to the right. So this one is a little bit more fiddly for me. It may not be for you, but I'm going to make sure that I'm twisting that stitch to the right. So you can see here it's twisting to the right. So that is how you know that it is a make one right. And I think we're probably good. Let's get to the end here. Okay, so I am on row 3, And the one thing that I did want to call your attention to is you can see here it starts with a KFB, a knit front and back, but it ends with a knit one through the back loop. So the KFB is one stitch before the end, and that is because when you use KFB a lot on the edges, you can always see the extra stitch that you add is always to the left. So what I was trying to do is get all of those extra stitches added in between the first two stitches. So you'll see when we get here at the end and do the KFB, you'll see that that extra little stitch ends up to the left. So I'm going to knit in the front and then in the back. You can see it kind of goes to the side there on the left. And all of the extra stitches that are made, they're all going to show up between these two edge stitches here. So when you do quite a few KFBs and you have them completely on the edge, sometimes you can have problems blocking it because it turns out just a little bit different. One edge can be a little bit looser than the other. Okay, so I think we're pretty much, I don't think that there's anything else in here that will give you problems as long as we have this kind of done. So I'm going to set that aside. And I am going to move on to chart C. So you can see here chart C and then chart D. So chart C is bigger. Forgive me for my printer. It is printing things a little bit dark. So you can not see these very well in here. This is much easier to read on my screen. Okay, so let's take a little bit of a look at mosaic. So mosaic is a lot of fun. I really enjoy it. I love watching the mosaic pattern materialize. So basically what mosaic knitting is stripes, and they're stripes with slip stitches. So what we're doing is working in garter stitch, and we're just working stripes. You can see here on the edge um, that how the colors just switch off. So we started with C1 and now we're on to C2 and we're just going along in the stripes. So often mosaic charts are not written like this, but I did actually put in the direction here, the symbol for slipping. So on each right side row, you're going to slip with your yarn in the back, and on each wrong side row, you're going to be slipping with your yarn in front. So you're always going to slip purlwise. And if you need to figure out where you are, like what color yarn you're going to be using, just take a look here at the edge and you will see the very edge stitch here is always going to be in the color that you're using for that row. So for instance, we are starting here with color 1. We're going to work across. So this is the base row here, and then we're going to start in with the color up here. So I wanted to kind of bring your attention to this little middle increase here. So what that is, it's a lot like a noop if you've ever done a 5-stitch noop. This is going to be a setup just like that. So there are going to be 5 stitches worked into this one center stitch. And that is done because in these color 2 rows, you're not going to be working color 2 into the center stitch. You're going to be slipping those. So this whole spine here is color 1. So all of the increases fall in that color 1 stripe. None of the increases are going to fall in your color 2 stripe in the middle. So only on the edge here. So again, I love my Post-its, and I'm just going to use a Post-it for a little bit of a chart keeper. I'm just going to do um, 2 of them here. So this first row, again, no mosaic on it, but I wanted to show you this because of that little center stitch here that's 5 stitches into 1. So, so I see that it says Tart Keeper, but it's actually a Chart Keeper on my captioning. Okay, so I just cast on enough so that I can do 1 repeat here on either side. So over at the right here, I'm going to start with a KFB, and just going to work over. So this is not terribly interesting at first, but I wanted to make sure that I showed you that center. So what I like to do when I'm transitioning between like the center that we just did, coming off of that and establishing the pattern, I like to put clip-on markers where I'm going to be needing them. And that really helps me to make sure that I don't have too many or too few stitches. So I highly recommend just kind of before you start doing this first row here, just put on little clip-on markers. And I have these. Um, there are all sorts of different ones. So these work as well. Those little markers, you can get gazillions of them. Those work great too. It's always really nice just to make sure that you have the right number of stitches before you get to the center and realize that you're missing one or you miscounted or something. So it's a great way to check yourself. Okay, so here we are. We're at the center here, and um, you can see the instructions for this um, little symbol in here. There's a chart instruction in the key, and then there's an abbreviation that explains what to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove that marker that I have around the center stitch, and all of the stitches are going to be worked into that one center stitch. I'm going to work 5 stitches into it. So I'm going to knit 1 and then yarn over. So now the next stitch that I work is going to be the center stitch. So I'm going to put my marker back in there because I always like to keep a marker around my center stitch to make sure I can find it. Then I'm going to dip in and knit a stitch. Okay, so once that is done, I'm going to place another marker so I can kind of keep it right around that center stitch there. And then I'm going to yarn over and then work my last stitch. So what I've just done, I'm going to take that marker out. So what I've just done is work those 5 stitches into the center there, and that the centermost of the 5 stitches is now my spine stitch. I'm just going to work to the end here. So like I was saying before, this is not that big a deal, this first row, but I wanted to make sure that I had everything down for you. I wasn't sure if I would make it to another row with one of those increases. So just wanted to make sure that everything was going well. Okay. So I hope everybody is doing okay. I know there's been lots of bad weather. And I know lots of people, power is out. So I hope everybody is well out there. Um, it's crazy weather lately. Anyway, I'm thinking of you all. I was reading about you on the news this morning with the nor'easters. And this past weekend in the West, we had some pretty funky weather here too. So there was snow, in fact, and lots of rain. So I'm kind of hoping that um, the drought will be a little bit better, at least in some places. So let me just power through this and get to the middle. So every time we do that, that 5 stitch increase in the middle, the next row, the wrong side row here, we're going to be knitting through the back loop of each of those 5 stitches. So that's going to help close them up and they'll look neater that way. So otherwise they just look kind of messy because there's some yarn overs in there. So all I'm doing is just knitting those through the back loop. And you can see it's adding 2 stitches on either side there. And let me get to the end here. And then it's mosaic time. Woo! So mosaic knitting is incredibly cool because you have this beautiful pattern, color work pattern, without having to carry more than one yarn at a time. And it's also much easier to work this on the back side because it's all slipped stitches. So if you've ever tried to do like stranded knitting, not in the round, you will know what I mean, that it can be kind of difficult. So don't forget, um, every row has an increase at the beginning and the end. That's how the shawl turns into a shallow crescent. Okay, so let's just move this up. Again, I always like to cover the pattern up above. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is look at the edge, and I can see here that I need to be using color 2. And my color 2 that I chose in my original shawl here was the one that contrasted the best with everything else. So I know that some people are knitting from stash. So I do want to suggest a couple of areas where if you don't have enough yardage or something, or you want to add extra colors, you could do that. Um, so you could kind of carve up the mosaic. So color 2 could be carved up a little bit. For instance, you could have one color with color 1, and then you can switch over again. Here, when we go into color 3, you could have a different color 2 with your color 3. And then down here in the border as well. So if you don't have enough yardage for color 2, you could do 2 or even 3 of those, and that would be pretty cool. There's also here, there's a little tiny bit of color 1 right along here. So if you were running short on color 1 and you get down here, you can just put a stripe of something else in, and that will work well too. Okay, so my color 2 here is high contrast. I'm going to use a white so you can see it really well. So when I am working with my second color, when I start it, I just let it hang down. So here's my color 2. I am just going to let that hang there. And since I tension I hold my yarn in my left hand, I'm going to tension a little bit with my right hand just to kind of hold those steady. But I don't really have to do that. Even if it's loose on the side, it will be fine because I can just pull it tight and fix it up. So I'm just going to start here with my KFB and then my knit one through the back loop. And then I have two, two color 2, and then I'm going to start slipping stitches there. So here's my KFB, and it's just a little bit loose, but I can kind of snug it up just a little bit. Okay, so I'm over here now. I'm going to knit 2. Okay, so when I do these slip stitches, I like to have a lot of leeway because no matter how much leeway I give myself, I always tend to pull it a little bit tight. So I keep those apart. I keep it stretched apart. So I've just slipped one stitch. I'm going to be working 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of those slip stitches. So there's my first one. You can see I'm keeping that pretty far apart. So I'm actually spreading these out pretty far apart here so that I don't knit it too tightly. So if you have the tendency to work this a little too tight, you might want to go up a needle size here. You can see I am still really keeping it loose. Okay, so I am right here at the beginning. This is a little bit weird because my contrast yarn here is a white, but I'm actually working from these darker squares. Okay, so I have 2 slipped and then I'm going to knit 3 stitches. So I'm still like stretching this out pretty well. So I want to make sure that I can stretch this out on the needle. And even if it looks a little bit sloppy right now, it will block out at the end. Okay, so I've done my 3, and then I'm going to just alternate to the end of this repeat box. And you can see I'm really stretching this out. So I want to make sure that I have enough room and it does not pull in. So I'm at the end here. I always like to use the markers, especially on mosaic, because I kind of get lost in the middle here when I'm alternating. So here I am at the end. Okay, so I have 2 more slip stitches, and then I'm going to knit 3. Okay, so I'm in the center now, and you can see I'm just going to slip that. That's why we did the increase on the previous row. So I like to give it a little bit extra room in the middle here so it will block out nicely. And this is a mirror image of the other side. So we're just over here on this side. So I've done my 3 right here and just heading into the rest of it. Okay, so I'm in this second repeat here. And just going to continue across. So I have 3, 4, and 5 slips. and then 3 knits. And I'm still really working hard on keeping this stretched out so it won't pull in too much. And now I'm at the other end here, and I have 5 more slip stitches. Okay, there's my 5th slip stitch, and then 2, and now I have a KFB and a knit 1 through the back loop. So this is what you want to see. You want to see it so that it's nice and stretchy like this. This is what's going to give you a good block and make sure that the pattern comes out beautifully. Okay. So on the back side here, I usually don't follow the chart just because I basically just slip the stitches that were slipped before. So now as I'm going, I am going to knit front and back, and then knit 1 through the back loop. And so now I'm just going to be working everything as as it lays here. So it's a garter stitch, so everything is going to be a knit or a slip. And whenever I come to a slip stitch, I'm going to bring my yarn forward and just slip that stitch. And I still want to make sure that I have enough leeway there. I don't want this to pull in. And this is looking a little tiny bit sloppy, but I have faith that it will block out really nicely because I've done this once or twice before. So it's always kind of cool to do a swatch if you're a little concerned about how things are going to look. And that goes also for color. If you're not sure about what color, like if your color is what you wanted or you had something else in mind, sometimes there can be a few surprises when you start knitting things up. So just going along here, and I'm just keeping, so now I know a lot of you throw. I'm not a very good thrower, but um, I'm gonna show you what that would look like. So if I held the yarn in my right hand, so I'm gonna be slipping purlwise, and then I'm going to bring it to the back here. And now when I make my knit stitch, I still want to make sure that there's plenty of leeway there, that it's not too tight. Now I'm going to bring my yarn forward again and slip that middle stitch, bring my yarn back. So I just want to make sure that I'm holding it a little bit looser. If I'm trying to choose between loose and tight, it needs to be looser. So let me just go on here. Um, I'm way faster at holding the yarn in my left hand. But um, I've seen lots of people who are extremely fast holding it in their right hands. Okay. So basically the back side is where you're going to get a little bit of rest. So you're just going to be going along, working all the stitches, slipping the slip stitches, knitting everything else except for the edges. So definitely, if you're going to or one side or the other, then make it looser. So Wendy asked if my polish is fluorescent. It does glow in the dark. Yes. And it glows in black light too. So, okay, so um, we're at the end here. So my polish is how I amuse myself. Okay, so now we are up to the next row. All right, so some people have a little bit of a tendency to um, make their stripes too tight. So let me show you how to get around that. Okay, so I'm going to be working with color 2 now. I always bring my yarn up, my new yarn up behind the one that I've been working with. So I've brought that up behind. Okay, so now if I'm worried about my stripes being too tight along this edge, what I'm going to do is put in a little yarn over at the beginning of the row here. And then when I'm finished coming back the other way, I will drop it. So that's, let's see how that looks. If you hold your yarn in your left hand, you're just going to put your needle underneath the yarn here. So I always hold it with my finger. And then I'm just going to start the row. So I have a KFB. So here is my KFB. So you can see right here, I have that extra yarn over. So when I come back the other way, I'm going to drop this yarn over. If you're worried that you might forget it, definitely mark it with a pin. And that way you can remember that you need to drop it. Okay, let me show you what that looks like if you're using your right hand. Okay, so I want to get a little yarn over beforehand. So I'm just going to keep my finger on my yarn here and put my needle in. Okay, so here is my yarn that's going over the top. I'm going to hold it there with my thumb and then do my stitch. And that is how you would do that if you're an English knitter, holding your yarn in your right hand. So again, this is just in case you have problems with your sides here being too tight. You're just going to put that yarn over in and then mark it. Make sure that you drop it when you come back the other way. Okay, so let me put that back. I think I'm okay here on this row. So I'm not going to leave that yarn over in. Okay, so I'm back to color 1. So the very cool thing about mosaic, you'll see long stretches of color. So for instance, you see this really long stretch of color here, and those are going to be on the row where you have that color stripe. So in other words, in a mosaic pattern, when you have a long stretch of color like that, it's going to be worked in the yarn that you're holding. You don't want more than, say, a 3-stitch wide thread strand in the back. So just get this going. I think I do. I may have, I don't think I have any that are that long in this. Okay, so we're right here. And okay, so now I am right to this really long stretch here. And I'm just gonna knit that as usual. So Wendy, I think everybody needs fluorescent nail polish. or at least black light. Okay, so I'm at the edge here of my repeat. And now you can kind of see um, how that looks. So those slip stitches from color one here, so from my base row with the color one, and those stitches were slipped across my color two row here. So now I am knitting into them on row three here when I have another color two stripe, and they're coming together really nicely. I have a nice stretch in there. So that's what it looks like on the back. So there's not much of a float, just a one stitch wide float. And you definitely, you want to keep those floats to a minimum. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to put that aside for a moment. I'm going to take this off. So remember I was talking about we have on the end, beginning and end of each row, there is an increase on every single row. So that means that the rows grow really fast. And because of that, what I have done in here is every time I'm able to, I've been incorporating another repeat into this repeat section here so that the charts don't get completely out of hand. So at the end of row 8, I have enough stitches over here and over on this side to incorporate another repeat into this box here. So I have down here, I was working this repeat box 5 times. Up here, I'll be working it 6 times all the way up. Okay, and it continues just like we were doing down here. When you see a long, like a larger number of stitches like this, it's always going to be in the row that you're working. So in other words, it's going to be in the color of the outside column of stitches. So if you take a look, just wanted to bring to your attention rows 13 and 17. So you can see here, right in the side here, there's a slip stitch on each of those 2 rows. So that sets up the pattern. So on row 16, it moves over here. And same 17 and row 18, it moves into the pattern area here. Yes, I do. Yeah, the little pearl bumps. I love those too. I think they look really cool. I love the texture of the mosaic. And then over on this side here, same thing happens. Just an extra stitch is slipped, and that's going to help set up this pattern right in this area up here. And I can take this, I'm just going to borrow a little piece of my shawl here so I can pull this down, and you can take a look at what it looks like once it has been blocked out. So you can see the little pearl bumps in here that you were talking about, Hillary. And so when you look really close up, the pattern isn't as obvious. When you back off, it becomes much more obvious. Okay. So let me just put my shawl back up here. Just kind of let that go. Okay. Okay, so to recap, um, 5 repeats down at the bottom here, goes up to 6 repeats up here because this little edge part here becomes a full repeat that I can bring into this repeat area. Okay, so then let's take a look at chart D. So chart D, basically, same thing. There is just a plain row here of color 2, and that is to set up these slip stitches, to set up that pattern in here. And same center, so I tried to keep that consistent, that center is always that 5 stitches into 1 stitch. And same over here, same things will be happening. There are a couple of rows here where one of these 2 side stitches is slipped, but this column on the very last column, the very first column, they're always going to be in the color that you're using in the stripe row. So whatever color you see right here for the first stitch, that is the color you're going to be working across in the row. And then the top part is not that difficult, nothing exciting up there. And so I'm just going to sort of blather just a little bit and see if anybody has any questions before I wrap up. There's a bit of a delay. So if you have any questions, let me know. And okay, so we were doing the second section here, and it's going to end with 317 stitches, and your last rows are going to be of color 3. So color 3 is the same color as the lace up here. So the next panel that we're going to do is this lace panel. And the mosaic up here, that was a 16 stitch repeat. The lace is going to be an 8 stitch repeat. So I like to keep it easily divisible. Okay, so once we are with the 253 stitches at the end of C, and then 317 at the end of D. And let's see, Amy says, thank you. Yay. Thanks for dropping by. And then Wendy, we can cut color 1 at the end of chart C, correct? Yes. Yes, yes, you can. So at the end of C, you're not going to be using color 1 for a while. You are going to do this whole area here. Let me switch over so you can see a bigger picture of the shawl. So once you're finished with chart C, that's this little area up here, then you're going to be doing this whole area in colors 2 and 3, and you're not going to be using color 1 again until this little stripe down here. So yes, then you're safe. You're safe, no more color 1 for a while. Okay, well, Sue, thank you for joining me. I'm so glad it was helpful. And thank you, everybody, so much for joining me. I hope this is really helpful. Again, we are knitting together in my Ravelry group. And then there's also a Zoom meetup this Saturday, and you'll have that registration link in your updated intro file. So there's this pattern file where you're getting all the different sections updated bit by bit. And then there's an intro file as well. The Zoom registration link is in the intro file. And the Zoom Hangout is going to be this Saturday, and that's October 30th at 1 p.m. Pacific time. So I hope you can join, even if you're not knitting on the autumn shawl-along. Just bring whatever you're knitting on and kind of hang out and just enjoy the company. So hope to see you there. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining me. I'm going to take one more look and make sure I didn't miss anybody, and then I'll sign off. Awesome. Okay, looks good. So take care, stay dry, stay safe, be well. It was a pleasure, and I hope to see you Saturday. Bye-bye.